Okay, let's get started. It's 2 minutes past one, and we can let people in for a few minutes anyway as we kick off. Welcome everyone to our product launch, Thriving in the New Normal. I'm Lee Morris. I'm a consultant and facilitator working for ANDS Partnership, and today we're joined by a number of other people working for ANDS Partnership, and you will hear from them either their voice or by chat. So just to introduce Dave Tomkinson.
Hi there.
Anne Lashmar.
Hi.
Colin Murray. He's on. And I think we're even joined by Ian Kay.
Good afternoon.
There we go. And welcome to one and all. Really good to see you. I think probably most people will be used to Zoom by now, after using it for pretty much 3 months, or systems like that. This is a 45-minute session. The content will be led by us, so it's very much a webinar and a product launch. One thing just to point out straight away is that we're looking at putting out some taster sessions on this product as well. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that towards the end of the session, but that will give you a bit more opportunity to interact and find out a bit more if you'd like to do that. There's still going to be opportunities to interact. We might use polls or chat or whiteboards. And what I would say, anybody that's not used to using Zoom, there should be a black or grey, dark grey coloured toolbar, maybe at the top or the bottom of your screen if you hover your mouse. And one of the things you should see is chat. Chat you can use throughout. We might do some activities requiring you to use chat, but also any questions you've got whatsoever, just throw them into chat. We'll endeavour to ask them as soon as we can during the session, or if not, we'll come back to you after the session. Try and keep your microphone on mute. This is just really to restrict background noise. I'm doing my best to restrict my dog Mabel's background noise, but if you do hear a bark or two, please forgive me. Obviously have a pen and paper handy if you want to make some notes. However, a recording will be available on our website. Over the next few days, we'll publish it on the website. And anything that you miss and you want to find out a bit more, just please contact us. So a little bit about us before we get stuck into the product Thriving in the New Normal. And this was a photo that we took at our last product launch, I think it was, at the London Stadium. So unfortunately, I couldn't invite you there today, but I'm sure sat in your living room or wherever you are on Zoom, probably in the heat, unless you're lucky enough to have air conditioning, it'll still be a great experience for you. So yeah, we're based in Nottinghamshire, passionate team of people, very, very experienced in what we do. So what do we do? Well, we're a leadership and organisational development consultancy. Some of you will know us, some of you might have experienced us and recognise the photos or the videos on the screen. We focus on helping individuals and businesses be at their best more of the time. And, you know, our mission to grow leaders, develop teams and shape organisation, I think really resonates with me. So we've been going, well, since 2003, so 17 years, and we work with a number of organisations across loads of different industries as well. So that's just the range that we put on there. There are many more that we work with as well. And what do we do? So some of our products include management and leadership development products. We do resilience, especially through change as well, which I think is pretty important and important for our latest product as well. We're also very keen on well-being and mental health. We see that as being vital to any management or leadership expertise anyway. So we're accredited now and we can deliver programs for Mental Health First Aid England or do standalone programs as well. We look at performance as well. So we've got a product called Peak Performance. And we also look at coaching, so we can look at training people on coaching or also holding coaching sessions as well. And we've put on numerous talent development management programs over the years as well. And a lot of the time this will lead to cultural change. If you want to find out a little bit more, obviously a little bit push for time on this webinar, just Google us and go into andspartnership.co.uk. So the first thing that I want to look at is, and we can look at doing this on chat. are the challenge that you guys have got ahead of you for you or your organisation. So it'd be really good to get your views, your thoughts, your feedback on the key issues you think you're going to have to face in the coming weeks and months ahead. So anybody, if anybody wants to put that on chat, and then we'll have a look. Colin will have a look at what we get through. Starting to come through.
Right, thank you. So what have we got then? So people being unsure of new rules, new safety. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, I suppose, entering into the unknown. Furloughed staff returning, I suppose that'll bring in a number of challenges as well, because some people won't have been furloughed as well. So all sorts of challenges. Any more challenges from anyone? Yeah, trying to be motivated to get back into work. I think that's probably going to be a key one for a lot of people. And again, furloughed colleagues. I guess it's the key theme here is a lot of people coming back together after some time away, having had different experiences. The changing landscape of the workplace, and how that impacts the needs of the individual and the organisation as a whole. Yeah, it's going to be a very different place, I think, when people come back. And how to manage these stress levels. Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Colin, and thanks all for sharing those on chat. I'll tell you one question that I'd like to know. We can probably use polls, I think, for this one. With lockdown easing, how do people feel about it? So if we can launch a poll, we've got a few polls, but there we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. Just select one. It'd be quite interesting. Fantastic. So
those results are in. Hopefully everybody can see that now. So it's actually quite a bit of a mixed bag. Most people are feeling a mixture of anxiety, excitement, and a bit of concern. One person's feeling pretty positive about things. Well done, you. But yeah, I think that's probably to be expected, you know, facing into new challenges, new experiences when everybody starts to come out of lockdown.
Fantastic. Thanks all. Thanks, Colin. So I think we'll all agree that there are challenges ahead, and this is why we're looking at this new product, Thriving in a New Normal. And I'm going to pass the baton over now, over to my colleague Anne.
Hi, thanks Lee, thanks Colin. So hi those of you that know me, those of you that don't. We've been working with organisations using virtual workshops really since kind of the end of March. So we've been hearing where people are at kind of right in the middle and then right at the beginning really, and then as things are moving forward. And people are saying a lot of the things that you just reflected there in terms of starting to think about, actually, I've had a really significant experience here, but it may not be the same as other people. You mentioned furlough to some people, there's nothing happening in their organisation. Other ones, they're really in the midst of it. And even some people thinking, well, why was I furloughed and you weren't? So one of the things that we know will be really important, and we know is important in terms of helping, is to really get a sense of where current reality is for people, because it will be different for different organisations, but different for different people as well. So there's been such a sort of rich, powerful experience, and everyone's experience of that will have been different. And there will be people who've really loved working from home. There'll be those who found it really challenging, kind of can't wait to get back in the office, but can I do that? And then obviously all the other multiple experiences of looking after childcare, and maybe they had a partner working at home as well, kids back from university, and all those different kind of configurations, many of which are carrying on. So I think we know it's not as simple as saying we can just sort of pick a switch like old Boris last night or on July the 4th and everything will be back to normal. We all know that. So it's going to be really important, I think, how we help ourselves and others sort of navigate our way through the changing world in front of us. And I think, you know, we're using the phrase new normal, but I think for me it's going to be iterative. There will be a newer thing that we'll get used to, and then there'll be another thing that we get used to. So what's going to really help people, I think, is that sense of a pathway forwards. So having had some sense of recognition that people's experience has been different, and it will have affected people some much more in terms of almost like mental health than necessarily just the physicality. I've just seen that point coming through, Sheena. So really that recognition of individual experience and then a pathway forwards is what people are going to need. And obviously that's what we're talking about today. We also, it's really important now about how we're supporting leaders to lead. So some of the people who've been in our workshops have been the leaders of that team or leaders of teams who haven't been involved. And they've been going through their own powerful experience, but also at the same time being asked to lead others. And I think some of the comments we heard from them over the last few weeks, months have been things like, the beginning, actually everyone was just pitching in. It was just like, everyone was so helpful, decisions made quickly, people taking ownership. It was kind of brilliant. It was almost like, this is exactly what we want to happen. And then others were saying, actually, there's a bit of a honeymoon period going on here. People have really been pitching in, but what's going to happen in the next phase? And I think that's where some of the anxiety is coming from. It's overall, it kind of sounds like good news, but actually, how are we going to do it? How are we going to play our way into it? And then other leaders, we did some work with the building trade quite early on, and also NHS. And they were talking about this sense of actually things might kind of like peak and trough in terms of how people are feeling and kind of, got our act together, then feeling a lot more uncertain, or things become clear, then they feel a bit more chaotic. So how do we help leaders lead in a situation like that when they'll be experiencing it themselves, but also being required to lead others? So something we always do, and those of you who know us will know this, our kind of approach really is try to help construct the conversations that people need to have they perhaps otherwise wouldn't be having. So how can we help people to do that so they can really be talking and sharing and the things they need to talk about, and then giving some kind of tools, some kind of navigational map, as it were, to help people on the way forward. And those are two things that we would always be endeavouring to do with our clients in change anyway, as it were, but obviously now more than ever because it's so widespread. And I think resilience was the other point in Sheena's message just then, in terms of actually, it's really important right now that we're helping people build their resilience in order to have almost been getting through what they've been getting through, but now that things are starting to change. And confidence, I think that's a big one that may be assumed, oh, we're getting back to normal now, everyone's going to feel good about that and off we go. But actually, I think there's been quite a dent in people's confidence about the future and maybe about the things they previously took for granted. So that will be some of the threads about how we would address a situation like this. And obviously we've been going through it ourselves as well. And the conversations we've been having have given us some light on that. What we have also gleaned though from talking to people, how useful they found it to be able to come together, even using virtual means, which perhaps traditionally and previously you might have thought, surely you have to get them in a room. And I think we've proved that actually being able to do this through digital means is still pretty effective. And obviously going forward, it's still going to be necessary probably for a good while, because furlough, working from home, there will be some combinations of that continuing. It won't all just be back in the office. So that's a bit about where we come from. And they've got two sort of key tools and models to share today on which we're anchoring our approach. And the first one talks about the dimensions and aspects that we need to consider for our people. So those of you who know us well, you might recognize some of these headings in terms of it's kind of a way, you could say we have 4 different energies that we bring to things, but it's also 4 different aspects of being human beings. So I'm just going to say a little bit about these 4 ways of thinking about your people, and then we're going to ask you a poll, think where has most of your attention been in terms of recent weeks or nearly months now, really. So people's physicality is kind of the obvious one. And in terms of practicalities, that whole thing where most people have been dislodged in some way, either working from home or still working in the office, but in very much spread out, split shift kind of ways, really. And then the very immediate observations about what that's been doing for people's sense of health, their opportunity to sleep more, travel less, more stressful at home, and also how they've been looking after their well-being as this has all gone on for quite a long period of time. So there's something about people's sort of physical experience of this. Then another strong area, and this has come through really clearly in the conversations we've been having, is people have been very attentive to people's emotional needs, probably more than usual, because everybody was suddenly dispersed. Therefore, the whole idea of dialing in for a Zoom call or a Teams update daily. One organisation right at the beginning was having a daily update about work, and then 2 other ones just to kind of come together like for a virtual chat around the coffee machine. So the whole piece about tapping into and acknowledging people's need to feel connected and to feel engaged, particularly people's emotional side. Then bottom left then, this idea of people's sort of cognitive thinking side, So what are we doing? What have we been doing? Is it time now to get people's kind of cogs turning in terms of, so how are we going to work differently in the next phase? What kind of planning can we do? Scenario planning, what if, these kinds of things. So actually getting people's brains working again about the future, or even just the short-term future. And what's also been so interesting, lots of clients have been wanting to promote, agile working, and actually a heck of a lot of that's been happening. But now, how do we think about it so we keep the stuff that we want to keep, perhaps we amend the stuff that we wouldn't want to keep? And then the last area here, this is kind of the future focus, the kind of inspiring side of our humanity. We need to feel there's some sense of purpose. We need to feel we're going somewhere, this side of us. And for some people, that's been absolutely kind of on hold, partly perhaps because whatever they were planning got scotched, but also it may have been subsumed by other more pressing concerns. So this is around helping people and tapping into, again, their sense of purpose, collective purpose, and the future, the way forward. And certainly one of our clients is the ambulance service, and when we were working with them, they were saying actually one of their leaders had really spoken very powerfully about that common purpose right in the thick of it, and how helpful that had been, as opposed to purely the emotional, how are we all this morning, physicality, shall we dial in today, tomorrow, have you got the right kit, and how do we plan for this week? They really felt actually the benefit of someone bringing them back up, eyes out of the detail. So that whole side of people with that need for sort of vision, future focus, and therefore in the organisational place, where are we heading, what is it we're coming together around? So just a quick overview of those 4 aspects that we know are really important for people. So the poll question for you now then is, if you think about what's been going on in your organisation the last 2 or 3 months, which of the 4 do you think has been your major focus so far? Can you see the poll, guys?
Right, I don't know if you can see the results, Anne, but the majority has been really focused on emotional side of things, I think. Although it's quite close, so we've had 6 people saying emotional, 4 people on thinking, and 4 people on purpose and future. Interestingly, nobody has said the major focus has been on the physical stuff in terms of, the technical activity or anything. It's all been about emotional thinking and purpose. Yeah,
well, I would say that looks good, guys, having asked some other groups this kind of thing. I think the emotional one has been highest, which we would expect. But what we're saying is here, actually, it needs to be, in due course, it needs to be all 4. And as we're moving forward now, we absolutely, if we have got, doesn't look like it's so much here, but if we have got
Sorry, I could have typed this, but it would have taken a long time. For me, in healthcare, it was actually a really difficult one, because other than the purpose and future, the other 3 were almost equal, because we had to adapt our environments very quickly to take care of staff and patients. We had to make sure our hardworking NHS frontline staff had emotional support. And we had to adapt the ways of working for non-clinical staff at home, a very quick turnaround, change the processes of the whole way the trusts and hospitals operated. So for me, actually, although you said there's nobody in the physical came first, then the agile processes and the emotional side of things sort of came in, but the physical side actually took precedence in the very first few weeks, because we had to rapidly change the way we did things at a scale.
Yeah, so I think that's interesting, and it's interesting that we can start to think about it this way, is in terms of, we just do stuff when we've got a crisis on, but now we're moving forward, we think about, okay, so where have we been? And I guess our insight is actually, it's a good way to think about, how am I looking out for my people in all these areas as we adapt and go forward. Just forget the emotional.
But also we've also got the added thing that there is the potential for a second wave. So we are definitely looking at the purpose in the future of what we could have done better over the last few weeks, how we can better prepare ourselves, or as well as still trying to keep our business going and growing.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
So that's one way to...
It was just too much to type.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, Gina. Thank you. So that's just one way to be thinking about what you've been up to, where your focus has been with people, and where it might need to be going forward. And obviously, it is all four, but a lot of people will have been, particularly either initially or now, focused on one or the other. So with that in mind, and with our experience of working with organisations going through significant change, not this exact change, because of course none of us had this one before, but we've been around a while, as Lee has said. And one of the things we know is really important is this idea of a pathway forward. But recognising you won't just switch from as is into the to be. There's more to it than that. And there's a particularly significant middle phase. So this is the kind of headline of our approach that we're really sort of articulating today. So what we know really helps is in the initial phase, which is kind of where we are now really, is the provision really of things that support people during significant change and give them the ability to get through, to cope, to manage some of those immediate stresses and stay in as good shape as they can sort of during the kind of very, very early parts of it, so at a human level. The next phase, we're going to say more about all these three, and this is an easy one to miss, is actually before rushing on to creating the new normal, it's really important to give people the space and opportunity to pause and review and reflect how it has been for them, what's happened for them in the period, how they've felt, what they've noticed, what's been the impact, and let it go. So hence the word release. Dave will say more about this, but it's a really important piece that might feel a bit like, oh my gosh, we don't want to go there. We just want to move into the new normal, but we know how really important that piece is. Having done that then, allowing the opportunity to be validated for who you are and how it's been and release it in a structured way, then that final phase is this idea of adapting to the new normals, the new landscape, the new iterations, i.e. continually having a contingency plan for what if there's more, or what if we have to work from home again. So adapting and learning how to adapt so that we can support our people to accelerate into those new normals, performing and actually achieving what is hopefully still our purpose and having the outputs that we want to have. So we break it into the three phases for those reasons. The colours probably are correct, are traffic light colours. So I'm just going to say a little bit about phase one, and then Dave will talk about the others. So this is all in detail on the website for those who want more detail, but this is kind of how we've mapped it out really. And the focus of this first piece is really supporting individuals and teams with how they actually stay sane in one level, but also how they can kind of make sense of what's happening to them. So some of the things just to highlight, we've been drawing on here, is the whole piece about mental health. And that probably has been the thing that a lot of our clients have been asking us for. Actually, could you give us, or how could you help us with some short, sharp support for people to be able to make sense of kind of what's happening for them and maybe what's happening for others. And we all know that's kind of out in the topic in the newspapers and television at the moment. But for a lot of people, working from home has not been a great thing. Some people have a nice house, nice garden, that kind of thing. But for other people, it's been pretty grim. So people have had quite a powerful experience there. Just another one to bring out this, you can obviously see what's written there, but in the emotional side, it's a bit about taking people with you. And most of our clients are all using Teams and Zooms to kind of connect and meet with people in a sort of virtual way, but giving support about how can you help people start to, again, making sense of where they are, why things might be feeling or happening the way they are, and what are the things they can be doing in the very short term. So bringing people with you during this period rather than assuming they're okay, or I talk to the ones who want to talk for me. And the bottom one in the middle area about thinking and planning, and we've just been doing some of these recently with the ambulance service that we support around leading remotely and what that really calls for people, because our sense is that we will not all be getting back in the same office anytime soon or in the same kind of working configurations. So what's going to be important if you want to both lead your team but build their resilience when you're remote and maybe some of them are remote. So that's just a flavour of some of the sorts of things we'd look at in that area there. And then just a quick flash here before I pass over to Dave, is it's too complicated to read now, but this is one of the tools we found very useful of helping people think about their 4 different kind of energies, their 4 different aspects: physicality, emotional, intellectual and spirit, and do a bit of a personal audit. What is my state of well-being in each of these areas, and where do I need to focus? And when we've done this with groups over the last few weeks, a lot of them have really identified how looking after their physical health, eating, running, walking is something they're doing more about and it's much better, or they could be. And I've had some great comments from people realizing they'd lost sight of some of their personal purpose stuff during this period, been so swamped, and actually they wanted to kind of refocus on that. So that's been a very useful tool that we've used. So a flavour there of what we do in phase 1. Over to you, Mr. Dave.
Okay, thanks, Anne. So as Anne's already said, the phase 2 review and release is probably the one that organisations miss most often. People often just get on to the doing and the planning and the right, how's the future going to look? And that we've split this phase down into 2 sides. The first side is being and the second side is doing. And the reason for that is that both are equally important. And if we just focus on the doing, then there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't get talked about or doesn't get released, which can result in resistance going forward. It can result in lack of productivity, or ultimately it can result in continued poor mental health happening. So there's a lot of reasons why that being side is really important. I was going to pick out a couple of bits from within this as to how we approach this. The being needs to happen kind of just ahead of the doing. If you go straight onto the doing, then again you'll get resistance, which is one of the things that that we sort of talk a lot about in our change work. So there's a couple of things on this left-hand side that it's really important to focus on. The first one would be whether there's been any sort of survivor or guilt syndrome. And although that's quite common when you're making people redundant, some organisations may still have to do that. You're also going to get a version of that with the furloughed, non-furloughed people. When the person comes back off furlough, who's been sitting in the garden for 4 months with a suntan and actually talks to the person who's been working 12, 14-hour shifts and has never worked so hard in their life, there's going to be some stuff that needs to be processed. And if you just let them sort it out themselves, they might do or they might not. So the whole thing around this kind of survivor syndrome is quite important to think about. The other thing is around purpose, and finding your North Star is the way that we do that. People could well have forgotten their purpose or indeed changed it, because a lot of people who've been off for a series of time are perhaps reevaluating whether they want to commute to work, whether they want the type of role they're doing, whether they want full-time or whether they want to do part-time. So helping people to re-establish what their purpose is and get really comfortable with that is critical for them moving forward. And the other one which we do, and there's a big part around this about facilitated storytelling, people telling their emotional story as well as the physical thing about working from home. How's it been for them during lockdown? That's going to be absolutely critical. And to do that, we have something that we've got on here as facilitated venting. Sometimes it's called controlled whinging. This is what leaders don't want to get into very often, because they say, oh, it just becomes a whinging session. Well, not if it's facilitated properly, and some whinging is necessary, because if people have got gripes or emotions that they need to get out, if you don't get them out, they'll just fester and will come out in some other way at a later point. So doing it this way speeds things along. And so there's plenty of stuff on the right-hand side that still needs to be done, that you'll recognize all of those, I'm guessing. But just to give you an example of some of this facilitated venting, one of the activities that we can do in this is something called Mad, Sad, Glad. And we're not going to spend long on this today because it's just a webinar, but what we'd like you to think about is, for you personally, since this lockdown started, you will have had a whole series of emotions. So on the chat, just literally put some bullet points. It can be about either any of these three, but what are you mad about that's happened over the last 3 or 4 months? What are you sad about? And what are you glad about? So just start putting those into the chat, if you will. I'll come back to the chat in a second, but I'll just talk a bit more about this activity as you're all keying that in. So what are you mad about? What are you sad about? And what are you glad about from the lockdown 3 or 4 months? The way we normally do this is in obviously either a face-to-face or in a group on Zoom. And effectively, we give people chance in breakout rooms to talk about this, and they go through the 3 emotions in order. So you get that anger out, and then you get the sadness out, and then you end on what they're glad about. And then you process that and you get people to talk to each other about it. And it may be that one person is really mad about what another person has done or hasn't done. So we create a safe environment for people to talk about that and to process it and and put it to bed, if you like. Because people won't have done things deliberately over lockdown, the vast majority of people. If they've upset people, it won't be because of something malicious. So that's how we would normally work with groups on this, and creating an atmosphere of safety is really important before you start this. So what we're getting on here is mad that China's doing this to us, and mad that I didn't buy stocks in March, particularly in Zoom, I'm guessing. People are mad about things going on in America, people not taking the risks seriously at the beginning, initial slow reaction of government. So you do get things like political feelings coming out, which is absolutely fine. If that's what people are feeling, then it's important that people have the opportunity to talk about these. And mad about not being recognised financially for success. And then we've got a sad in there, loss of old way of life, and also glad that things are starting to return to normal. Sad about colleagues facing awful days, death of patients, death of colleagues, friends and family. You will have people, if it's not people on this call, you will have people who have lost people or know people who've lost people. And they may not have had the chance to properly grieve for those people. So it's about making sure that you allow time for people to talk about that as well. The price tag on this that are going to have long-term consequences, deaths in the country, can't see parents, missing holidays. And then people starting to come in to talk about what they're glad about, working from home, community spirit, time for family. There's always stuff that, good stuff that comes out of bad. And some of the things that people are, the way, as Anne said, the way people are working is actually a real positive. And glad time spent with the kids, yeah. Although for some people that probably will have been a sad or a mad as well. But so yeah, and time to focus on activities, yeah. Been putting off for years. So thank you for all of those. Obviously, we don't normally do that by chat. It's normally face to face and in a safe environment. So that can work really well with groups when they're starting to get back to whatever normal is going to look like. Yeah. So that's phase 2. As I say, this is only a sample, and we have got some more webinars that Lee will talk about at the end. Yes, I think as many of us can relate to that, Sheena. Sad for the extra weight I've put on due to bad eating habits. Yeah, and some people may well, nobody's put it on this one, but people have put it on other ones about alcohol consumption. Obviously, talking about a friend, so in terms of this middle phase is really critical, but the third phase is the adapt and accelerate. This one really has to be done again at the right time. If you do it too soon, you get resistance and people don't come out or they go backwards. The phrase I like is around the change curve, where you say, if you ask me where I am on the change curve, I move forwards. If you tell me where I need to be, I move backwards. And I think this really identifies the timing, and the diagnosis is critical. If you do this at the right time, you can put together some really good stuff around building and rebuilding teams. Maybe the team hasn't changed, but if they've changed their working practices or where they're working from, or even just the fact that they've been apart for 4 months, might mean that there is some rebuilding work that needs to be done, and some reconnecting across teams. Teams might well have just been focusing on themselves and not focusing on connecting with each other. And the other thing just to say on here is that sometimes organizations need to be reconnected, because what's happened is that in so many ways, organizations have sort of been pulled apart in doing this. And you've got the workers, the non-workers, the furloughs, people whose jobs might be at risk. And reconnecting that organization, it can be absolutely crucial. And we've got a number of ways we do that virtually and face-to-face, of getting organizations back to being connected again and really working effectively together. So that just gives you a flavour of these sort of phase 2 and phase 3. And as Lee's going to talk about, we will have some more webinars. If anybody's really interested in going deeper on these phases, then we'll have some different webinars that people can join. So I'm going to hand over to Lee now to talk about diagnosis.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I just want to sort of end that by talking about partnering with us. So some of you will have done this, some of you might be doing it now, but some of our sort of USPs, I think, are the fact that we're so flexible. We certainly don't believe in one size fits all off the shelf stuff. We will adapt to your requirements. We certainly offer a truly blended approach, and I think after these 3 months of being on Zoom and Teams and various other video conferencing facilities, we've become adept at that and actually realised that you can deliver some incredible stuff using that as well. But I think that the whole range, the blend, is really important to us. So we'd still say face-to-face is important, but the virtual side and micro learning side as well is really, really key. And we also add things like questionnaires in there, pre and post questionnaires, diagnostic methods as well. Some of the stuff that people say about working with us is our ease. It's kind of cheesy, this, I guess, but big enough to deliver and small enough to care. But that is true. We're quick to respond, and we try and deliver a personalised service time and time again. And just looking at diagnosis, Dave just touched on that. We're experienced at diagnosing needs. We use a range of different methods to do that, whether it's face-to-face conversations or whether it's a questionnaire. We will do that. We'll work with you and partner with stakeholders in organisations to make sure that we're getting the best from the training and the development. So a little bit of a quick diagnosis. Obviously, this has been very, very much a whistle-stop tour today. It's a 45-minute webinar, and we are coming to the end of that. But just a couple of minutes, really, just to spend on this. So which element we've touched on today? So it could be a phase, it could be one of the different factors like physical, emotional, etc. Do you think is going to be critical to get right for your organisation? So if we're looking at from sort of now, and into the near future. If you can just add that onto chat, that'd be really good. And I think Dave, do you mind just hopping on and just seeing?
Of course, yeah.
Is that all right? Fantastic. If anybody's got anything, I think we've got at least one.
Yeah, so the mental health support as we come down from the peak and resilience going forward are two things that are felt to be needed.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd say about that is that as we sort of deliver Mental Health Aware, which is a half day, both face-to-face and virtually, but we also do the Mental Health First Aid, which is a 2-day face-to-face, but also a 2-week course over a period of time. So it's really flexible. So you get some live sessions for a couple of hours, and then you get some individual learning. The other thing that I would say about mental health and stress and resilience is that we've designed bespoke packages as well. So we don't just have to go through Mental Health First Aid England.
So the review and release phase would be important for Julie. Managing the friction between furloughed and non-furloughed staff, as we've talked about, that can be a real big one if we're not careful. And also getting getting furloughed staff back up to speed. They will have missed a lot in 3 or 4 months. So getting them back up to speed will be key. Bringing leaders back together, unfragmenting the organisation, making it feel like a well-oiled machine again and going in the same direction. Yeah, absolutely. So those are the main ones so far.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Thanks everyone. We will move on. I think one of the things that I really want to say is around continuing the conversation. So today is just a flavour, as you know. We're all about conversations at Ham Partnership, and we really like to continue the dialogue with yourselves. So one thing that we would like to offer as part of this is a free 30-minute diagnosis meeting over Zoom or Teams or even over the phone. Where we can kind of get to grips. We can give you a few pointers on where you perhaps need to focus. We can maybe identify some pinch points and really help you as a leader in an organisation plan For what will be challenging times. It might seem all smooth sailing, but I'm sure there will be some challenges to come. So we've got a diagnosis meeting which any one of us potentially can host, and we can arrange that with you. So it'd be quite nice on the poll, I think, just to get an idea where people are on that in terms of a 30-minute diagnosis. This won't be shared, by the way, with everybody else, but it'd just be interesting to gauge your initial ideas. That don't mean you can't have one after, by the way, but be interesting. Waiting for a few more, I think. Almost there on the ones that choose to vote.
I've just ended that poll now, Lee.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Great to share that flavour. Thanks, everyone. In terms of staying connected, some of you will already be doing this, and that's fantastic. But if you do want to find out a little bit more about us, please access the website. Follow us on LinkedIn. You'll get plenty of updates on other free webinars that we've got, any of our products. And we're also, we've got a number of blogs out, actually. Dave's written a couple of blogs on the sort of situation in lockdown and people's reactions to that. So that can be a really interesting read. And feel free to email us, hello@ampartnership.com, or give us a quick buzz. One thing that I do want to mention before I go is that after this, we've got another free webinar exactly the same as this, but we're having a lot of interest in this. So we're putting another one on. I'm sure I'll get corrected by the guys on this if I get this wrong. 7th of July, I think it is. Yeah, 10 o'clock. That's on our website, or email us for further details. You know, if you know anybody else that might want to go through this, that'd be really good. And then what we're also going to put on is a taster of each of the 3 phases. So you don't have to attend all of them. They will be free to attend, and they'll be for around about an hour, but you'll get a lot more time to talk. We don't particularly like to just watch people's faces or blank screens. We do like to have a conversation, so we'll use breakout rooms then and whiteboards and things like that. So watch this space for that. We will, Colin will be in touch anyway, I'm sure, and we will get those dates out to you. It will be on a first come, first serve, and we are going to limit that because we want interaction with people. So watch this space for that one. We're coming to the end of the webinar now. We're at nearly quarter to two. One thing that I would really appreciate is if you could give us a little bit of feedback on the webinar and the product. So it might not work with everybody's camera, but if you can open your camera and sort of put it up to that QR code on the screen, it literally will take you a couple of minutes to complete the survey, the questionnaire. And that'll just give us some real good intel really for developing the product, but also for future webinars and for our taster sessions as well. If you do have any other questions, obviously throw them onto chat. We'll be staying on for a couple of minutes after we end this session. But for now, thanks everybody else. Thanks everybody for attending this session. Been really nice to see everybody. Hope you got something from it. Enjoy a red hot afternoon ahead of you. Thanks, guys.
See you later, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.